Our series, Show and Tell, will take you inside some of the great libraries, both public and private, to explore books and treasures from Jewish history.
What you're looking at here is a manuscript Siddur. And it's an unusual thing because with the advent of printing, Hebrew manuscript production decreases. Most people would prefer to buy 5 printed books or 10 printed books rather than spend the money
on one handwritten manuscript.
Manuscript tradition doesn't completely peter out. We have calendars that are done, Sifrei Vronot. We have Kabbalistic works, people writing their own books. But for the most part, once printing begins in 1469, 1470, that was the unusual phenomenon about Corfu, that in fact we still have the continuity of manuscript tradition. What you see over here is a very interesting phenomenon. In the early 18th century, there were a group of Jews known as court Jews. And these court Jews were very, very wealthy financiers to all of the various principalities throughout what's known as the Habsburg Empire. Vienna, Frankfurt, all of the various cities in Ashkenaz, where there were wealthy rulers who needed bankers, basically, to support what they were doing. So these Jews were very wealthy, and what they did was they created a renaissance of illustrated and decorated Hebrew manuscripts. Because at this point, you could buy a printed prayer book. So if you wanted to do something wonderful, you would create a manuscript and you would give it as a gift. And we find...
It had to really distinguish itself because print already exists. So
Exactly,
these manuscripts are very artistic, very colorful.
Exactly that. So this is the very first one of this revival of Hebrew manuscripts. This is dated 1712 to 1714. It was written over a period of 2 years.
And this is all hand...
And this is all hand done. Now, at this time, this was written in Vienna, at this time, the Jews weren't allowed to have public synagogues. So the synagogues were probably in the home of the court Jew. And therefore, this might have been the Chazan's prayer book to daven from, which is why it's so large. Most of these 18th century manuscripts are miniature books. Many of them are Seder Brachot that were given from the groom to the bride, to his bride-to-be. And they're books of blessings, mitzvot nashim, etc.
There's so many libraries in the world. What's special about the JTS library?
What's really electrifying about this library is how much of Jewish history it encompasses. We have books from the last 1,000 years from every single part of the Jewish world, from Yemen, from the Balkans, from Italy, from Ashkenaz, from North Africa, from Syria, from Lebanon. There's no aspect of Jewish history and culture which is not represented here. And earlier you had asked me, what's the most interesting thing? We keep finding more things all the time. There's not a moment that we don't look through the stacks and say, gee, that's absolutely fantastic. And what we're trying to do is digitize as much as we can to make it available to people around the world. But also, scholars and interested lay people are invited to come in, make an appointment. You can use the rare book room. You can handle these things yourselves carefully. And I find that holding a piece of history from the 15th, 16th, 17th century, whether it's an illustrated Haggadah, whether it's a Pinchas written by a woman, whether it's a decorated Megillat Esther, whether it's the last ketubah in Corfu that was created for a wedding 2 weeks before the Nazis annihilated the entire Jewish community. There's something very electrifying about having all of this material and being able to share it with the public.
What an amazing day spent at this library filled with treasures from all corners of the earth, from all times of history, the Jewish people, all coming together and their ideas alive and being preserved in the JTS library. What an absolute pleasure and privilege to spend the day with you and all these incredible treasures at the JTS library.
Thank you so much for coming. It was our pleasure.